Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The Lost Heart of Mary, Queen of Scots. One of the most shocking events of the reign of Queen Elizabeth I was when the Tudor monarch sentenced her cousin and former Queen of Scotland, Mary, to death. Elizabeth signed the death warrant of Mary after Mary had been involved in a number of plots to oust the English Queen from the throne. Following the Babington Plot, many of the schemers were condemned, and it was the most senior to go for a date with the axeman, who was the abdicated Scottish monarch, whose son was the current monarch of the Scots. But Mary's execution occurred at a castle which today little remains of, but there was a legend that followed her death that her heart and entrails were buried within the grounds of Fotheringhay, a short distance to where the axeman took her head. But what is the story of her lost heart, the heart of Mary Queen of Scots? During the embalming process, it was rather common for hearts to be removed and for these to be buried elsewhere away from the body, especially for high-profile people. Jane Seymour, the third wife of Henry VIII, had her heart removed after her tragic death, and despite her body being interred in a vault in Windsor Castle's chapel, her heart, it's believed, was placed in a lead casket and was then buried under the altar of Hampton Court Palace's Chapel Royal, close to where she died, in rooms just a stone's throw away from giving birth to Henry VIII's heir, Edward VI. This wasn't a practice which was performed centuries ago, as the novelist's and poet Thomas Hardy's heart was buried elsewhere from his body, with his heart being buried with his former wife. However, Mary Queen of Scots' heart has allegedly gone missing, and it has never been found. On the 8th of February 1587, Mary was then brought into the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle, and she had been told the night before that she was being executed the following day. An account of her execution states that her, Mary Queen of Scots' prayers being ended, the executioner, kneeling, desired her grace to forgive them her death, who answered, I forgive you with all my heart, for now, I hope, you shall make an end of all my troubles. Then they, with her 2 women, helped her up, began to disrobe her of her apparel. Then she, laying her crucifix upon the stool, one on the executioner's, took it from her neck, the Angus Day, which she, laying hands off it, gave to one of her women, and told the executioner he should be answered money for it. Then she suffered them, with her 2 women, to disrobe her of her chain of pomander beads and all of her other apparel most willingly, and with joy rather than sorrow, helped to make her unready herself, putting on a pair of sleeves with her own hands which they had pulled off, and then that with some haste, as if she had longed to be gone. All this time they were pulling off her apparel. She never changed her countenance, but with smiling cheer she uttered these words, that she never had such grooms to make her unready, and that she never put off her clothes before such company. Then she, being stripped of all her apparel, saving her petticoat and kirtle, her 2 women beholded her, made great lamentation, and crying and crossing themselves, prayed in Latin. She turned herself to them, embracing them, said these words in French, N'ai cru vu, j'ai pomme pour vous, and so crossing and kissing them, bade them pray for her, and rejoice and not weep, for that now they should see an end of their mistress's troubles. Then she, with a smiling countenance, turning to her men servants, as Melvin and the rest, standing upon a bench nigh of the scaffold, who sometimes weeping, sometimes crying out loud, and continually crossing themselves, prayed in Latin, crossing them with her hands, bade them farewell, and wishing them to pray for her, even until the last hour. This done, one of the women, having a Corpus Christi cloth, lapped up 3 corner ways, kissing it, put it over the Queen of Scots' face, and pinned it to fast the cool of her head. Then the 2 women departed from her, and she, kneeling down upon the cushion most resolutely, and without any taken or fear of death, she spake out loud this psalm in Latin, In te domine confindo, nor conforda, in aeternum, etc. Then, groping for the block, she laid down her head, putting her chin over the block with both her hands, which, holding there still, had been cut off, had they not been moved. Then, lying upon the block most quietly and stretching out her arms, cried, "In manus tau domi," etc., 3 or 4 times. Then she, lying very still upon the block, one of the executioners holding her slightly with one of his hands, she endured 2 strokes of the other executioner with an axe, she making very small noises or none at all, and not stirring any part of her from the place where she lay. And so the executioner cut off her head, saving one little gristle, which being cut asunder, he lifted up her head to the view of all the assembly, and bade God save the Queen. Then her dress of lawn falling off from her head, it appeared as grey as one of the 70 years old, polled very short, her face in a moment being so much altered from the form she had when she was alive, as few could remember her by her dead face. Her lips stirred up and down a quarter of an hour, and after her head was cut off, then Mr. Dean, Dr. Fletcher, Dean of Peterborough, said with a loud voice, "So perish all the Queen's enemies." And afterwards the Earl of Kent came to the dead body, and standing over it with a loud voice said, "Such end of all the Queen's and the Gospel's enemies." Then one of the executioners, pulling off her garters, espied her little dog, which was crept under her clothes, which could not be gotten forth but by force, yet afterward would not depart from the dead corpse, but came and lay between her head and her shoulders, which being emboldened with her blood was carried away and washed, as all things else that had any blood was either burned or washed clean, and the executioners sent away with money for their fees, not having any one thing that belonged unto her. And so every man being commanded out of the hall, except the sheriff and his men, she was carried by them up into the great chamber, lying ready for the surgeons to embalm her. However, whilst she was laying inside of a room in Fotheringhay Castle, as mentioned, she was embalmed. She was then laid inside of this room for a matter of months, until she was finally buried at Peterborough Cathedral. During the embalming process, she had a number of her organs removed, including her heart and her intestines. It was then said that these were buried nearby, inside the grounds of Fotheringhay Castle. This would mean that somewhere today, under the grass where the former building stood, probably or possibly in the upper bailey of the castle, her heart may still remain. Also there was a chapel, which was inside of the bailey in a separate building away from the keep, on top of the hill, and it's possible her heart was kept near to the altar in the chapel, but today, as mentioned, nothing remains. Her heart was supposedly buried nearby, and this would have been a relic which Elizabeth I would have hoped would have been lost to time, as anything that belonged to Mary while she was at Fotheringhay was burned and got rid of. The story of her heart today remains a secret, and one that may still have an ending. There is, of course, the possibility that it was moved nearby, or that someone local may have found this, which was incredibly intriguing, but a relic of such importance, such as the heart of Mary Queen of Scots, would be considered invaluable to Catholics across Europe. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.